this book comes out. It's called Donald Trump versus the United States, Inside the Struggle to Stop a President. It's by two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times reporter Michael Schmidt. And we get a little bit of a hint about what might have happened there on page 389. Quote, either the Constitution meant something and was worth defending, or it wasn't, Pelosi contended. The Senate would also almost certainly not convict, but that wasn't the point. This was for the record and for history. The whistleblower on the Ukraine matter had accomplished what everyone before him had failed to do. He'd stopped President Trump in his tracks and had him on the path to being impeached. 2 months later, on a Saturday afternoon in mid-November, as Democrats moved toward their impeachment vote, Trump made an unexpected visit to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. The White House played off the trip as part of the president's annual physical, but provided no other details about the examination, raising questions about the president's health. In reporting for this book, Schmidt writes, I learned that in the hours leading up to Trump's trip to the hospital, word went out in the West Wing for the Vice President, Mike Pence, to be on standby to take over the powers of the presidency temporarily if Trump had to undergo a procedure that would have required him to be anesthetized. Pence never assumed the powers of the presidency. The reason for Trump's trip to the doctor remains a mystery. So we still don't know why President Trump was rushed off to Walter Reed last November. But we do know now, thanks to Michael Schmidt's reporting, that whatever it was serious enough that the vice president was warned to be on standby, that the president might have to be put under general anesthesia, which would occasion Mike Pence having to temporarily become president. And he had warning to be doing that. And, I mean, to state the obvious, that is not something that happens when you go in for a segment of your annual physical. If you had to go under general anesthesia to have an annual physical, nobody would have an annual physical. Michael Schmidt's new book, again, it's out tomorrow, is full of stuff we did not know before, which itself is saying something, because Michael Schmidt has been a scoop machine at the New York Times since Donald Trump has been president. He has reported a lot, but there is a lot that is new here. Here's another one. This is about the Mueller investigation, and specifically what the president thought he could do to get out of it, if need be. This is amazing. People talk about, like, oh, there's too many lawyers in public service. In this case, maybe a little more lawyer in a little more legal knowledge for this particular public servant might have been. Anyway, this is from page 18. Quote, to anyone paying attention, Trump looked like he was in trouble, but he still didn't seem to get it. Instead of taking a disciplined approach led by experienced Washington white-collar defense lawyers, as Bill Clinton had done when he was under investigation, Trump had initially put together a hodgepodge legal team of undisciplined lawyers and television pundits. In the same way that he'd used the tabloids in New York, he thought he could use his Twitter account to undercut Robert Mueller. Even as he intuitively sensed the danger Mueller posed to him, he still coped with that danger with bravado and arrogance, the same way he had managed banks, creditors, civil lawsuits, and divorce lawyers throughout his public life. At one point, as the investigation seemed to be intensifying, Trump told White House counsel Don McGahn that there was nothing to worry about, because if it was zeroing in on him, he would simply settle with Mueller. He would settle the case as if he were negotiating terms in a lawsuit. Robert Mueller was not suing Donald Trump. Why did he think he could settle the case? He thought he could pay Mueller, and that would make the Mueller investigation go away? In Michael Schmidt's new book, he also reports that that same White House counsel, Don McGahn, was personally responsible for choosing two of our nation's Supreme Court justices, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, as well as choosing most of Trump's other judicial nominees, because the president apparently had no idea, and he just let Kavanaugh do it. Let McGahn do it. Quote, McGahn had accepted the White House job on the condition that he essentially serve as a committee of one to determine whom Trump would nominate to the federal bench, including district courts, appeals courts, and Supreme Court vacancies. Unlike previous administrations that relied on teams of White House and Justice Department officials who spent months, if not years, carefully deliberating on candidates for judicial nominations, McGahn streamlined the process and just ran it out of his own office. When he settled on candidates, he'd present them to Trump, who would approve the nominations without raising many questions. Simple as that. This hastened the pace at which the administration could get nominations to one of McGahn's closest allies in Washington, the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who would then ram them through the Senate. And just in case the power of that is lost upon us, that decision-making power just being delegated sort of without a thought to one White House employee, Michael Schmidt also reports in his new book that President Trump's own proposals for who should be on the Supreme Court were, number one, Rudy Giuliani, and number two, Andrew Napolitano, the judge from Fox News. Giuliani and Judge Andrew Napolitano from Fox News were the president's big ideas for his two Supreme Court vacancies. But instead, he let McGahn do them. Of course, he's also a man who reportedly also believed he could pay money to settle any adverse findings from the Mueller investigation, so here's more. Michael Schmidt describes in his book, President Trump, in April 2018, convincing himself that he personally, the president, could prosecute and lock up Hillary Clinton and James Comey. And he tried to. This is remarkable. Starts on page 308 of Michael Schmidt's new book, which is out tomorrow. Quote, in the middle of April, Trump turned to one of the few people in the White House who, in spite of their differences, he believed could actually get something done, Don McGahn. In an Oval Office meeting, the president complained to McGahn about Attorney General Jeff Sessions for his refusal to prosecute Hillary Clinton and James Comey. Trump told McGahn he wanted to order Sessions to prosecute them. If Sessions didn't want to do it, Trump said he wanted to use his power as president to prosecute Clinton and Comey on his own. It was a startling disclosure, even for Trump. Immediately, McGahn realized that the president's determination to use the justice system to selectively direct prosecutions against his enemies was an enormous problem. Trump was already under investigation for obstructing justice for his firing of Comey. Now his push for revenge, a blatant abuse of presidential power, could put Trump in the position of trying to prosecute a potential chief witness against him. Trump's request also showed McGahn that the president had little idea how prosecutions actually functioned, because the president has no power to order someone to be charged with a crime. First of all, McGahn told the president, you can't prosecute anybody. Second of all, that's the Department of Justice's job. And if you do that, they're all going to quit. Trump said he did not understand. He was the president and ran the executive branch. Why couldn't he tell the Justice Department whom to prosecute? Then over the next 5 or 10 pages of his book, Mike Schmidt explains in great detail and quotes liberally from the written memo that Don McGahn prepared for President Trump, telling him that no, he couldn't personally prosecute anybody. Schmidt quotes from it in part, McGahn saying to the president in this memo, you've asked what steps you may lawfully take if you disagree with the Attorney General's decision not to pursue criminal prosecution or not to conduct further criminal investigation, McGahn said in the opening paragraph of one memo. The line seemed charitable to Trump, who had rarely asked his lawyers whether something he wanted to do was legal. It's not as if Trump had gone to McGahn and specifically asked what was legal. He just wanted to know how he could throw Clinton and Comey in prison. Yeah, in case you're thinking about what a second term of the Trump presidency might be like, here's a little window into what he thinks he ought to be able to do. Right? As quoted by Michael Schmidt in this new book, the legal guidance that Trump got from his White House counsel, Don McGahn, told him he couldn't personally direct the criminal prosecution of his political enemies because that would cause a number of negative things to happen. McGahn warned him that, for example, senior Justice Department people would quit in protest. He also warned him that if the president went ahead and tried to do that, he could be impeached and removed from office. Well, those were warnings when McGahn was still White House counsel. Think about where the president's at now. Those were the warnings that kept him from trying to do that. But now, he has been impeached already, and he wasn't removed from office because Senate Republicans decided they didn't want to hear it. And now he's got William Barr at the Justice Department, who seems willing to do absolutely anything to benefit the president. So the Justice Department, the Attorney General isn't going to, first of all, he's not going to have to fire the Attorney General to get him to do something that he wants, right? He's not going to have to threaten that. What won't Bill Barr do for this president? He doesn't have to worry about mass resignations at the Justice Department, not under Bill Barr. And he clearly doesn't have to worry about impeachment and being removed from office. So do you think the president would feel constrained by those bounds on his behavior in a second term, now that we've got black and white evidence about what he wanted to do with his power in his first term? Michael Schmidt at the New York Times was first to break the news that Trump had told FBI Director James Comey that he wanted him to go easy on Mike Flynn, to go easy on National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, basically to ease up in that criminal case against Flynn. Comey wouldn't agree to that. Comey got fired. Comey ultimately gets threatened with prosecution by the president for his troubles. Flynn did get prosecuted by the Justice Department for a time. But then when President Trump got his new Attorney General in place, Bill Barr went ahead and followed through on that old request from Trump, and he did drop the charges against Flynn. Just today, a full panel of judges on a federal appeals court ruled that the judge in Flynn's case doesn't have to accept that decision at face value. The appeals court just ruled that if Barr dropped those charges against Flynn for improper reasons, the judge doesn't have to go along with it. This stuff is all still alive. This stuff is all still working its way through the courts in some cases. But now, with reporting like this, we know so much more about it. Schmidt, for example, reports that in the lead up to the 2016 election, in the summer of 2016, the intelligence community knew some of what Russia was doing, but they really didn't get it. They could observe that Russia was hacking documents and stealing them, but they thought Russia just wanted secrets. They thought Russia was just taking information for their own edification. They did not realize at all that the Russians were going to take that information and repurpose it. They were going to dump it back on the American public and the American media as misinformation to try to hurt Hillary Clinton's chances of becoming president. If you were hoping that congressional leadership might have been more attuned to those kinds of risks in the summer of 2016, Michael Schmidt further reports that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell fell asleep in the summer of 2016 in the middle of a classified briefing on what Russia was doing. Senator McConnell's office is denying that, but that is reported in Michael Schmidt's new book. Classified briefing is when they give you all the good stuff. He reports that McConnell, again, fell asleep. Michael Schmidt also reports that Trump tried the "you must be loyal to me" thing that he did with Comey on another potential FBI director. Here's how Schmidt tells that story. Quote, the day after the president fired Comey, Trump had called John Kelly, who was then Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security. Trump told John Kelly he wanted him to become the next FBI director. But the president added something else. If he became FBI director, Trump told him, Kelly needed to be loyal to him and only him. Kelly immediately realized the problem with Trump's request for loyalty. He pushed back on the president's demand. Kelly said he'd be loyal to the Constitution and the rule of law, but he refused to pledge his loyalty to Trump. In addition to illustrating how Trump viewed the role and independence of senior officials who work for him, the president's demand for loyalty tracked with Comey's experience with Trump. Trump had, of course, denied Comey's account of the president at a private White House dinner, demanding that Comey pledge his loyalty to President Trump. But here was another senior administration official recounting an almost identical demand from the president, a demand that had come the very day after Comey was fired. Schmidt goes on to explain that had Robert Mueller's team demanded a longer and more detailed interview with John Kelly, they might have gotten around to that story, but in their relatively short interview of him, they didn't get to that, and so they missed that, which might have helped them on whether or not the firing of Comey was obstruction of justice. There's also, I should tell you, on the John Kelly front, there is a moment in which John Kelly describes something about Trump as the equivalent of French kissing a chainsaw. And I couldn't explain all that part of it to you, but you're going to have to read the book for that one. Michael Schmidt also reports in this new book the backstory on how White House officials tried to stop Jared Kushner and the president's daughter Ivanka from getting top-level security clearances because of some warning that turned up in the investigation into whether or not they should qualify for that kind of clearance. Some sort of highly compartmented information that John Kelly was briefed on, which led to a strong recommendation that Jared Kushner not receive a top-level clearance. Nevertheless, the president overruled that objection and said that Kushner should get one, as well as his daughter Ivanka. This is from Schmidt's book. May 22nd, 2018, Chief of Staff's Office, the West Wing. Don McGahn's recommendation meant nothing to Trump. The following day, he told John Kelly that despite the concerns of the agencies and over McGahn's objections, he would grant Kushner and Ivanka top secret security clearances. Like McGahn, John Kelly felt the need to take measures to protect himself at that point. Memorandum for the file, read the memo at the top. The subject line read, security clearances for Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. The memo was only one paragraph. It said this, quote, the President of the United States has ordered that Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump be allowed to access national security information up to the top secret level. Accordingly, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump shall be granted top secret security clearances. And that's how we protect national security now. You've got the White House counsel and the White House chief of staff having been briefed on highly compartmented classified information that led those officials to say, no, these people cannot have high-level officials. It is not safe as a matter of national security. They make this recommendation explicit to the president. The president says, I don't care, give them the security clearances anyway. They do so, and then write a memo to file memorializing that that's why they did it. That's how we protect national security now.